Yields back, Ms. Demings.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Garland, it is great to see you again. We were together last week as the nation recognized 701 law enforcement officers who died in the line of duty whose names will be added or were added to the wall. Here we are, just a few yards away from law enforcement officers who were beat down in this very sacred place. We've been asked to move on, but Attorney General Garland, some of us just cannot, not yet. In your opening statement, you said that the department's core values are upholding the rule of law, keeping our country safe, and protecting civil rights. As I sit here today as a member of the House of Representatives, I see my job and also the job of every member of the House on both sides of the aisle, Attorney General, is, guess what? To uphold the rule of law, keep our country safe, and protect civil rights. As you know, I served as a law enforcement officer for almost 3 decades. It was an honor. And at all levels of government, whether local, state, or federal, law enforcement officers take an oath to uphold the Constitution, defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, enforce the laws of the land, and protect and serve their communities, or at least that's what the responsibility is about. It is about keeping the American people safe. Effective policing, though, requires resources and investment. We cannot sit here as policymakers and demand better policing, better training without providing the resources to achieve it. Attorney General Garland, I know you know, very familiar with the COPS grant program. As you know, it provides resources and assistance to state and local enforcement for things such as community policing. The Burn JAG grant provides several initiatives for state and local jurisdiction, including technical assistance, training, personnel, equipment, supplies for law enforcement, prevention and education, crime, victim and witness assistance, mental health, and related law enforcement assistance programs. Attorney General Garland, if you would just take just a moment. I know you mentioned earlier that your commitment in terms of funding to this very important initiative, but if you would just take a moment to talk about the effectiveness of the DOJ grant programs and talk a little bit about the future of those resources.
I thank you for that opportunity. This is part of our commitment both to keep the country safe and therefore to help state and local communities fight violence in their communities. Second, part of our obligation to uphold civil rights and so ensure that this be done with constitutional policing, and also with respect to our first priority, that is ensuring adherence to the rule of law. So we have asked for, in the 2022 budget, more than $1 billion in grants for state and local police organizations. That's $537 million for COPS hiring and $513 million for Burn JAG. Each of those are an increase for COPS. It's an increase of $300 million over the previous year. For Burn JAG, it's about $30 million increase over the previous year. But there are other grant programs that we've asked for money as well. One of them is quite important, is $100 million for a new community violence intervention initiatives. I met with community violence intervention experts in Chicago earlier in the summer. I was extremely impressed by the results that they've had in taking people who might otherwise end up in crime and setting them on the straight path. That particular program was actually a well-controlled study done by the University of Chicago, and it showed that these things actually work quite well.
Attorney General, if we could just switch gears for just a second. Of course. I want to talk about election security and threats that have been going on against election poll workers. And I know that there was a task force established in June of last year as a result of the rising threats, including death threats. How does the task force plan to coordinate with local and state enforcement and prosecutors to pursue cases against those who seek to intimidate election workers?
So like all of our anti-violence initiatives, from the violence initiatives we were just talking about, to Project Safe Neighborhoods, to the memorandum that we've been discussing earlier today, all of our activity in this regard involves partnerships with and meetings with state and local law enforcement. And with respect to election workers, we have, as part of our normal sets of meetings with respect to state and local law enforcement, we are meeting with them to identify threats, to find out where federal tools would be helpful, to find out where assistance to state and locals would be effective. There is a FBI tip line for threats to election workers, which are then funneled to the appropriate FBI office in the locality where the threats are occurring. This is similar to our work with respect to threats against members of Congress, the threats against judges, the threats against prosecutors, threats against police officers. All of these things are done with tight coordination with state and local law enforcement.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
I understand, Mr. Roy